Sahana vavatu, sahanao bhunaktu, sahaviryang karavavahai, tejasvina vadhitamastu, ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Part 1 was verse 1 to 2. How samsara operates, how samsara entangles, how the jaws of samsara catch us. And we said that the jiva, the person, is born with desires. Is there one person that is born without desires? What would that look like? Every person, every breath is a desire. So every person is, the implication of birth implies there is desire. Desire implies I wish to express those desires through this vehicle. Expressing those desires through this vehicle implies generating punya papam. Generating punya papam implies future consequences. Future consequences implies the world has to be there tomorrow in which the doer of the actions today can experience those results tomorrow. So if I say something to you that is unkind, and suppose you don't have the time to reply, and we're the only two people in the entire universe, and suppose I say something to you, the entire universe has to be there just for you tomorrow, so that, suppose I come back, so that you can say something back to me. In other words, the world needs to be there for the jiva to continue exhausting, to continue enjoying or suffering the consequences. In other words, the experiencer to continue experiencing on the basis of what has happened yesterday. And this is a common question. Why does the universe exist? For that very reason alone. Every desire, every jiva implies a desire. Desire implies participation. Participation implies punya papam. Punya papam implies generating actions. Generating actions implies consequences. Consequences implies the world is there tomorrow in which the doer can receive a reward or a spank as a result of the actions that he or she has done yesterday. And that is the only reason why this universe, this kshetra, exists, just for the jiva alone. Part 2 was verse 3 to 6, 4 remedies to samsara. So once we get entangled because of desires, as we just said in part 1, those entanglements are like the crocodile's jaw. Now, my question to you is, suppose a crocodile bites you. What do you do to have the crocodile open his jaw? Do you say a little prayer? Oh, crocodile, please open your jaw. Do you sing a little song to the crocodile? Do you call the police? Is the police going to believe you? What do you do to release the crocodile? You need to call a specialist, a crocodile jaw opening specialist. The one that recognizes that once the crocodile snatches, once it bites, it doesn't release. And there's a certain protocol, a certain ritual, we call it Brahmanam, a tradition by which, once applied on a daily basis, those jaws of the crocodile slowly start to ungrip. Now, this specialist comes over and says, look, I'm going to tell you exactly how to have this crocodile unhook itself from you. Step 1, vairagyam. You have to generate dispassion. You have to just chill out a little bit. Why? Why do we need to chill out? Because if we're not chilled out, then we are far too interested in things. And if we're far too interested in things, then we are emotionally invested in things. When we're emotionally invested in things, we cannot think straight because we're far too consumed about the results. When we're far too consumed about the results, we get frustrated because we're not applying our intellect, because the emotions suppress the intellect. And when nothing's working out, then we get frustrated, and then we reinforce our own helplessness and we say, see, no matter what I try, it doesn't work. In other words, Vairagyam, how is it developed? It is developed through inquiring into your experience. Because the question more important is, what is the cause of lack of vairagyam, dispassion? The cause of that is, I keep on participating in my present notions. When I participate in my present notions, I keep on getting the same results. And why do I keep on participating in my present notions? I don't have time to inquire about new methods of approach, new ways of approaching things. In other words, the more interested one is, the more hooked one is, the less chance they have of responding rationally. I was just going to a park with a bicycle, a bike park, and a lot of greenery. And so I just wanted to relax a little bit. And there was a family of two young boys. One was, I think, around 9, and one was around 5, and a father. And so I went ahead of them, and they caught up to me. Now, what happened soon enough is the little kid who was 5, he fell down, and I didn't see this. But when the kid fell down, the father shouted on top of his lungs at the little poor kid, 5 years old. It was so loud. There was actually a football field with baseball, sports people. In other words, they were doing their baseball, they were doing their cheering. The father was even louder than that. In other words, what does this say? The father is far too passionate, far too invested in his child. And therefore, what kind of consequences does that have? Not only does it hurt himself, not only does he embarrass himself, not only does he hurt the child, not only can he not think straight. Why? Because he's far too invested emotionally in his child. And therefore, it does not produce a good consequence at all. In fact, that's papam on the part of the father. So this is real life as we're talking about, not just some scriptural text that talks about vairagyam. So again, lesson number 1, reduce one's interest or passion into things. Backtrack, there's nothing wrong with interest or passion, by the way. Without interest or passion, you wouldn't be here. You wouldn't do anything. However, we have to build an objective relationship towards our kids, towards our spouse, towards our employees, towards work, towards traffic. If you're stuck in traffic going, why does this not move ahead? Guess what? Everyone else is thinking like that also. You're also part of the problem that you're complaining about. In other words, we always backtrack and then we say, hey, pause. I'm born. Because I'm born, I have desires. Because I have desires, I have to participate in the world. Just like everyone else is also born and has desires and have to participate in the world. And we are all in it actually together. Just to be born, you have no right to complain if you think about it. Because to be born, you come into a field. We come into a field, and that field entails responsibility. That field entails ups and downs. And therefore, by that alone, we have to take it. Take it like a man, take it like a woman. That's the expression. Just because one is born, just because one was too lazy to stop this journey of rebirth last life, they have to participate one more time. And for that reason, you have to take it. And this taking it is called vairagyam. The second is devotion. Devotion involves bringing God into your life, bringing Ishvara into your life. And this is by far the number 1 aspect of Advaita Vedanta. Advaita Vedanta does not advise discarding Ishvara or getting God out of the picture, because Ishvara too is mithya. This is not at all what we're teaching, but rather incorporating Ishvara in every facet of your experience, in eating, while driving, while exercising, while walking, while holding your child, while speaking to someone, while working, while the employee is angry at you, while you're talking to an employee, always bringing Ishvara as much as you can, whenever you can, in every facet, in every activity, in your speech, your word, and your action, as much as you can, because it keeps your mind humble, it keeps your mind quiet, it keeps your mind attuned and always honed into the most important part of being born. And that part, which is most important, is a relationship with God. Not only a relationship with God, but also my own recognition that I am not different from that which I am having a relationship with. And at the same time, while I recognize that, it doesn't mean that I can now go, oh, why are you having a relationship with God? That's still Dvaitam. You're still ignorant. That is not how it is. Adi Shankara was one of the most devotional beings on the planet, despite knowing that all that is here is one alone, without a second. So bringing Ishvara into one's life and settling accounts with Ishvara. Now, when I say Ishvara, what is Ishvara? Everything, every person, the environment is Ishvara, everything around us is Ishvara. Therefore, we build a proper relationship with the environment. And how do we do that? Through sadhana number 3, which is sadgunaha. Sadgunaha, which is good, healthy virtues. How do you apply this? By choosing one chief quality, one chief virtuous moral quality that if you were to incorporate it or sprinkle it throughout your actions, it would feel good about yourself. So the question that I have for you is, what quality would you have to, what moral quality would you have to sprinkle, just maybe add a little bit, maybe 2% of it or 5% of it, through your words, through your actions, through your transactions, that once you do that, you would feel good about yourself? Is it, for example, being a little bit more straightforward with people? In other words, just being direct and saying it how it is instead of sugarcoating it or saying something and expecting them to pick what you really meant by that? Or is it being a little bit more honest? Is it being a little bit more patient? Is it that I listened before to my mom or dad or spouse for 5 minutes? Maybe now I can listen to 5 minutes and 30 seconds. Would that make you feel good? So whatever it is, no matter how small, we incorporate that into our life. Is it being a little bit kinder, a little bit more gentler when someone confronts you, when someone approaches you? Suppose someone at work approaches you. Can you just maybe hold just a little bit longer before responding? Could that make you feel good about yourself? So anything that matters to you, you incorporate that, and then it percolates through all of your thoughts, words, and actions. And this is very important because we just said that Ishvara, being the nature of formless, also is in the form of this world. Therefore, my relationship with the world equals relationship with Ishvara. So you cannot just say, now I'm having a relationship with Ishvara in my little room, because the room is Ishvara, the person is Ishvara, outside is Ishvara, the shopkeeper is Ishvara, everything is Ishvara. Having a relationship with God, a proper one. How? Through healthy virtues. And these healthy virtues will be the heart of chapter 16. So the next chapter, 16, will be all about healthy virtues. And therefore, there's nothing to worry about. Part 3 is verse 7 to 12. So part 1 was verse 1 to 2. Part 2 was verse 3 to 6. Part 3 was verse 7 to 12. And this is saying that the total reality is also in the form of the jiva, is in the form of this individual. So the first question in verse 10 that we posed last week was, what is a jiva? So I'm going to ask you the question. So far, whatever you've picked up, what is a jiva? Whatever comes to mind, you can let me know.
Our human form with our mind, intellect, our senses, life.
Okay, so I'll make a small correction. It is everything minus the physical body. The physical body isn't necessarily included in the word jiva. So it is the mind and the thoughts and the emotions and all that, but not necessarily the physical body. In fact, in the Vedas, the physical body is so unimportant. It's just literally a vest, a coat that's being worn so that this subtle body can come through and express itself in this world. So again, what is a jiva? The answer is a collection of samskaras, a collection of past impressions, a collection of vasanas that manifest in a form of thoughts, emotions, and memories. That is all. I want to ask you, your experience as a human being, is it anything other than that? Nothing but an expression of thoughts, emotions, and memories. That's it. Is it anything else? What is a jiva? Samskaras. What are samskaras? Past impressions. What are past impressions? Those actions which have been performed by that jiva previously, and therefore they have become now these deep impressions that are causing, or which are manifesting thoughts to their liking. In other words, the thoughts, the emotions, and the memories will always correspond to these past impressions, these ways that the jiva has thought in a particular way, the way that the jiva has done certain things in a particular way. And this is the only principle that makes every individual here different, just like a thumbprint. Every thumbprint is different. Every jiva is different on the basis of every jiva has gone through different experiences. Therefore, we have different personalities. So now when someone says personality, what is a personality? Thoughts, emotions, and memories, which are manifesting because of the source. And the source is what? Samskaras. And this is the important part. In fact, this goes right through psychology, because psychology, as great as it is and limited in some ways or not, what Vedanta does is say, okay, so this patient in front of me, who are they? Who am I now looking at? Suppose a patient is now standing in front of you. And you say, where do I start? The first step you start to say, okay, let me acknowledge what is the truth of this individual. This individual, jiva, is past impressions, past samskaras, which are right now manifesting in the form of these thoughts, these emotions, and these memories, which are causing them to have a certain story, a certain narrative about oneself. Not only they are doing it, this person's doing it, that person's doing it, every person's doing it, 8 billion, 9 billion. Suppose the earth has 50 billion. I don't know how that's going to happen. 50 billion jivas, still the same story. Past impressions expressing as thoughts, emotions, and memories equals jiva. What does this imply though? When is your thought the same? Do you ever have the same thought? You may say, well, yes, I do, because, suppose I say the same thing to myself, I am this, I'm that, but there's always a certain variance about it, right? A certain, maybe a duration, how you say it towards yourself. So every thought, every emotion, every memory is changing moment to moment to moment to moment to moment to moment to moment. How many things have changed between these two thumb clicks? Many. What does that imply? The fact that there are so many changes has to mean that all of these changes are reflected back to the unchanging principle called you, the self, Atman. In other words, just because there are so many changes, it implies there has to be something other than those changes that has not changed at all throughout this entire time. And because that is so, one can successfully report that the changes have indeed taken place. Now, whatever that, because of which, is able to report that, that is what we call the final reality, Atman, from the standpoint of the jiva. In other words, the self, or Brahman, from the standpoint of the whole. Okay, so in other words, to whom then are all of these changes being reflected to? To whom are they all being reflected to? Are they being reflected to your spouse? No, they're being reflected to you. Okay, so you're going through a hard time, you're going through a stage in life, you're going through a certain, maybe a roller coaster. To whom are all of these changes, this roller coaster, being reflected back to? None other than you, the one in whose presence these changes arise, these changes disappear, these changes arrive, these changes disappear, these changes arrive. And it's not been any different when this person was a small kid. It's been not any different when this person is this person right now, and it won't be any different when this person is some other person in the future. In fact, let's go back into a jiva. Considering how many things have changed between now and now, there is not one single thing that's the same about this person. Not one. So you might as well just be a stranger to yourself. Your body has changed. New cells have been created. New cells have died, or old cells have died. Memories are different. Conclusions are different. You have a different narrative in your mind. Nothing is the same between now and now. And yet we have an impression as though there is a sameness. And why is that? That's the question. Why is it that there is an impression of sameness? Because of self. In other words, you can now call a police and suppose you say, dial the police and say, hello, police, there's a problem. What's the problem, son? The problem is that my present person has hijacked my past person just 5 seconds ago. What's the police going to say? They're going to hang up. But that is even the fact that that is true. That is what's happening right now, right now, right now. Nothing is the same between this person and this person. And yet there is an impression as though there is still the same person. So the question then is that I'm posing is, why is it that even though there's nothing the same between now and now, why is it there is still a sense of continuity in your experience? The reason is because of the final reality. So why am I saying all of this? To demonstrate that it's not like the final reality is away from you. And this is what Vedanta is saying. It is about owning up, going, oh, wait a minute. I'm already that. I was never away from that. So there's no point looking for it because, as I just demonstrated, that sense of continuity is there. And then we said, should the jiva not know this, that all of these changes are reflected to the original self, to the original consciousness, to the self, then what is the jiva going to do? The jiva is naturally going to make a conclusion. So then all of these changes are me. The person called I, they belong to me. And therefore the jiva, for that reason alone, is going to get born in such a condition, which is called a finite individual, a finite thought, a finite emotion, because the jiva thinks that now I'm a finite thought, I'm a finite emotion. Therefore, after death, what happens? The jiva still thinks that, the jiva, when I say subtle body, still thinks that, therefore continues existing in a form of that which the jiva believes oneself to be, which is none other than the finite subtle body and the finite physical body. And therefore, for the jiva, this is completely normal. They get born, they don't question their experience, they're totally fine with it. They keep on exhausting their desires until one day someone grabs them and then they start to reconsider their experience. And this is the spiritual path. We also said that the jiva still has the capacity to improve its death process. So suppose the person doesn't get it, or they tried the hardest they can, but they still don't get it. Or suppose they don't get it at all because they haven't gotten into it in the first place, into spirituality. Then one can still optimize, quote, optimize their dying experience. And what do I mean by this is they can still influence the variables as to how the jiva will be reborn next life. And we said, how is this so? Before the final moments. Now, let's just a little backtrack. Anyone who's been working, for example, Lorena will know, it's not like one moment you're fine, the next moment, right? It's not like that. It's so gradual that the person will slowly, get tired, more fatigued, they will talk less to you, and they will find it even hard to get up once, so they will get off the bed very less often. In other words, they will be very tired, and then slowly they will go into a small subtle coma. This is usually how it happens. I don't know if Lorena knows a little bit better. What's the most common way a person approaches towards their death? Would you like to share?
We've got one particular person who's been in between worlds for about 2 years. So she doesn't open her eyes. She doesn't get out of bed. It's like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Have you seen that movie where the grandparents stay in bed for years and years and years? It's kind of like that. She talks to people who are passed away. She has conversations with herself, with people that have passed away, with you as well.
Wow.
So it's kind of like a Twilight Zone.
Okay, so we said that this death process can be improved by certain things. You can chant Om, supposing that this Om represents something to you. So you don't just chant Om because someone's told you to chant Om, but whatever word, whatever symbol represents infinity for you, that is the thing, or that is the thought to bring into one's awareness as much as possible in those last few days, especially when a doctor confirms and says you don't have many few days left. One can exercise gratitude. One can go over their life and they say, I'm so thankful for meeting all of the people and, you know, having the children and having the opportunity to live a part, to be a part, to contribute in this world. I'm grateful that I was healthy for a long time, that I got the chance to learn. So just be really, really grateful in those final days. One can also think about anything that represents infinite rather than something that represents finite. Because if the person thinks about something that's finite, like the children, this is the most common, right? The children, something that's very close to me, I would think about, because it's so comfortable to do that. But then again, see, to think about that, you're ignoring something much bigger. So that is the one moment when the person doesn't actually, I mean, I'm not going to say what you should do, but it's ideally the person by that time will think about something that's infinite, something that's much bigger than just their kids, their work. Have they finished their report, you know, and who's going to get the money, you know, because all of these things are realistically going to come there. Which kid deserves more? Have I done everything I could? Have I hurt anyone? Should have I said something different? Regretting, all of this is just pointless by then. Regretting of not having done something else. I read a few books about this, and they say that one of the common things that people say to themselves before death is they regret not having done something else. That is not the time to think about regret of not having done something else. Whatever you've done, you have done. Be grateful for that. So that's the proper attitude. Okay, so through this, we can quote, optimize the dying process. And then the jiva moves on in a much smoother fashion.
I just like to add there, sometimes the person is not in their elements to even control that. And I think that's part of the natural process. I saw that personally with my dad. He was 90 and such a spiritual man, being a student of Swami Paramathananda for more than 30 years. I think from his 50s to his 80s, I think he used to attend his classes and things. But there comes a time when they let go of everything, as in like they become so childlike that I think even God kind of ordains that, in the sense that surrender everything to me. But on that magical day that he passed, I don't know what made my mother, he forgot all his slokas, he forgot everything. And then my mother for some reason sent something and she said, do you want to do your puja? It was like at a very odd time because he didn't have really timings or anything. So in the afternoon, he stood in front of, in his prayer room and said all the slokas that he hadn't said for probably a year or so beautifully. And I have a video of that taken by the attendant. I don't know why he did that. And within few years, he just slept, and that's it. And it was so divine, because it was like as though his favorite god was Krishna. And it was like he wanted to hear him say all the slokas that he was so used to saying, sorry, I'm getting emotional. But what I mean to say is, even at times when you forget, if you have that punya for God to remember you, it'll happen that way. So destiny to pass off like that is very, very blessed, because for a person who hadn't uttered a sloka for a year, he said everything, including Sarvadharman Parityajya Mamekam Sharanam Vraja, Aham Tva Sarvam Eshu Moksheshyami Mascha. And I feel he is at the lotus feet of the Lord. Because at 90, to utter that and pass on just in his own bed with my mother on his side is divine. So even if you forget, if you're destined enough, God will make you utter his word.
And this is
I just wanted to share that. And this just happened last October.
Yeah. And this is why, in those final days, it really is humility. And it's not a straight cut. It's not a clear cut how the person dies, or they just drop this, so a person can become a child, they can do some strange things, but then it's, you really just help them much whatever they can. It's not time to be a philosopher in the last days and tell them how now you're going to go to different world and you're going to be guided and so on. This is the most humbling moment in one's life when one's about to leave the world. So the least you can do is just help them however you can. Okay. Now, verse 11, we talked about two types of people. And the first one was the discerning individuals and the non-discerning individuals in reference to self-knowledge. So we're not talking about non-discerning in reference to non-self-knowledge. Self-knowledge has to be involved here. And let's talk about the non-discerning. This is the paroksha jnana. That means indirect knowledge. That means I'm interested, but it's not quite firm. It's not quite assimilated firmly into one's mind. And this person, firstly, is why are they staying at the paroksha level? This is an important question. The reason is because the person is still too passionate about their existing notions, about their existing beliefs. In other words, they're still unwilling to let go about the kind of environment they're being brought up in, and therefore that keeps on overshadowing this knowledge. So the teacher cannot get through. Someone says something, they say, I'm trying to provide you the logic, the reason, how it works. But then the person says, yeah, that all sounds great. But in the background, there's this narrative that keeps on overshadowing this over and over again. And that narrative is very hard to silence. So the person has to be patient with themselves. If they're saying, I've been listening for so long, but I don't feel quite changes are taking place fast enough, then there's no need to be angry or, frustrated. Just be patient, because everyone is going through the same problem. Everyone's going through the same issue, right? These programs have been ingrained for years, for decades. So one cannot expect suddenly, this knowledge to the old notions to fall away and the new knowledge takes place and now everything is okay. So be patient with yourself and be grateful that you are indeed having the capacity to continue day in and day out, every single day. Okay, so that's the first one. In other words, the person has to continue exercising viveka. So if one feels they're at the paroksha level, then what's the solution? He's saying, then what do? Continue your self-inquiry is the only answer to that, in the light of what you are hearing in the classes. This person who is at paroksha level, when they read the Shastra, their experience will be of the three following levels. And what we can, this is a good gauge to see. The first experience for a person in indirect knowledge will be, it will feed their self-image. In other words, the Shastra will be a means of improving their self-confidence in reference to the world. So here I read the Shastra and you don't. You need a very good mind to read the Shastra, by the way. And I have that, right? So in other words, the Shastra becomes a weapon. They weaponize the Shastra, or sometimes they will take the Shastra and they will try to apply it into their practice. So suppose someone's teaching a topic and they go, let me go to this Vedanta class and just get a few ideas. Okay, I'm going to get a few ideas. I'm going to give some value to my students in my class. In other words, they're not really there for themselves. They're there just to borrow and then share. And I know this because one of the examples, great friend, we became close friends. When I was at Chinmay in Kerala, the Kerala Chinmay International Foundation, I was studying there Brahma Sutra Chatushtari, the preamble to Brahma Sutra. And I met a guy from USA, and he was a professor of religion. So he was very smart, right? He could tell you all about different religions and the comparisons between them. But I will never forget it, because it taught me what it means to be stuck in one's head. It's like, no, it's information, right? It's factual. It's about who's correct in terms of information. It's not about, what you know, it's about what is true in terms of, the facts, like the dates, and, you're not using the right words. I told him once, the samskaras are like the causal body is like the storehouse of the samskaras. And he says, no, see, we don't use the word storehouse in Vedanta, but that's not the point. Doesn't matter how you say it. The point is, understanding always supersedes one's intellectual knowledge. So again, this is the level of paroksha jnana. It builds the ahamkara. So obviously he was there, I don't know why, but most likely to give some information to his students. The second is they will interpret the Shastra in their own way. So if someone believes that Krishna is a person in Vaikuntha, Kalidasa, or heaven, doesn't matter if you're talking about Jesus or Allah or any religion, doesn't really matter. Whatever pretext the person comes in, then whatever they read in that Shastra, it will reinforce that pretext. So in other words, they will, and this is how the Shastra can do two things. It can either clear you up, it can either make you think straight or move you even farther away from the truth on the basis of not having the right proper guidance. And this is why, again, we need someone to point out our blind spots, because we cannot see the blind spots ourselves. I personally was into this for, I think, about 2 decades, and no progress was made. It's only when I met my first teacher, James, in 23 days, he pointed out what I could not figure out in 15 plus years, basically. So why? Because I didn't have the right mentor. I didn't have the right person to reflect back my ignorance at that stage. So in other words, we need a mentor, we need a teacher to point out our own ignorances. And this is the beauty of the tradition. And this is why we always say, you know, one of the boons in life is not only to be born, but the second is to find a guru, and the third one is to learn the methodology by which it removes the person and reveals one's true self. So therefore, it's a great boon to receive the guru and to learn in the light of proper methodology, step by step, a consecutive build-up. Okay, so the first one is, again, it builds the self-image. The second one is it gets interpreted in the light of one's pretext. And the third one is it's neither A nor B, but rather when a person reads the scripture, they do not emotionally connect with the words. It is just like reading dry words on a science textbook or physics, you know, like formulas and mathematics. And I'm reading, you know, like just like a torchlight illumines the faced objects, right? But there's nothing, there's no connection, you know, when it says that you are total, you are eternal, you cannot die, you will go on forever. So there's nothing to worry about. So the person doesn't quite, they don't connect with that emotion, just go, wow, that's really interesting. You know, I have to figure out what it means. But the fact is, it's already telling you that you are that. So reading a statement, I'm already thinking about, I have to figure out what the statement is saying in the future. But the statement is trying to teach me right now and get me to contemplate what the statement is saying. And therefore, paroksha jnanam is this tendency. I look at a statement, it sounds inspiring, and immediately where does the mind go? Onto, I have to read that book. I have to read something to tell me more about what this verse is saying. Whereas the entire truth is in one single verse. In fact, one verse has the capacity to free oneself. So this is paroksha jnanam behavior. So this was all indirect knowledge. Then we talked about direct knowledge. This is aparoksha jnanam. And this is just a simple metaphor, like seeing the fan. Suppose you see a fan, but you're actually also seeing what? The fact that the fan's spinning. You're seeing the electricity. You're not actually seeing the electricity, but through your knowledge alone, you're seeing the electricity because you've gone through the necessary training. So just like that, the wise person, we'll call it a jnani, not only do they see the person now, which means the jiva, which means your thoughts, memories, and your emotions. Not only do they see the person, but they also recognize that I am the conscious light because of which this person is known, because of which this person's stuff is constantly coming to arising and dissolving, arising and dissolving. In other words, if I ask you the question, what is present in every cognition? In every cognition, what is present in every cognition throughout your life?
Awareness.
Yeah, you are. Yeah, you are. You know, it's not someone that you love. It's not someone that you don't like. It is you. In other words, no matter what thought arises, there's always a watcher, which we call the sakshi, that's watching that thought coming and going. So that person, that being, that conscious being is none other than, as we discussed, Sat Chit, because we already established you always have an unbroken sense of isness, unbroken sense of existence, and you also recognize that you are aware. In fact, you don't have to recognize that you're aware. It's only because you're aware that you can recognize that you are aware. In other words, you are already that right now. And this is what Vedanta keeps on pointing over and over and over again. Therefore, if you say, well, what now? Like, you know, now that I've heard this, what do I do now? Nothing. You just continue with your duties in life. You know, nothing's really changing. No one's worshiping you. So, you know, we still have the same problems that are there in our life, and we still have to attend to them. And we just live our lives with humility, humbly doing the best that we can, influencing the small amount of people that we can. It's never going to be a big thing. It may be big, it doesn't matter. But this is a real, quiet personal journey, right? Once you hear this knowledge, you continue with your life. In fact, in the Vedic culture, we had married couples. The guru was married, and this was common, right? You go to a gurukulam, you hear the self-knowledge. This was normal, like moksha is normal, and then you just do your self-duty. It's only today that this moksha is kind of like being, I don't know if it is blown up, some special. It's not special at all. It's as I said last week, it's a crime not to know this knowledge. One has to know this knowledge. And then they continue their life just like they always did. So there's nothing to be proud of. There's nothing to be kind of excited, happy, non-happy. It's a duty for a person to know this. That's all we can say about it in terms of down-to-earth knowledge. How many of us remembers quadratic forms, prime numbers, elliptic integrals, zeta function, Cauchy's theorem, hypergeometric series? How many of us remembers all of this from our high school? None. Okay. Gognor does. Gognor is a geek. Good geek. Well done. So you're like, what are you talking about? I forgot all of that. And remember in high school how we were so sharp? We got our A's and B's and so on. We impressed our parents. Where is all of that knowledge now? We forgot. It's all forgotten. But have you forgotten yourself? You cannot forget yourself. We can forget your entire life. You can get amnesia even, but you can never forget yourself. And that's why self-knowledge is always the most important, because whatever knowledge we specialize in for however many years, you can get so many certificates, put them on the wall, can put the entire wallpaper, entire wall certificates. But as we get older and older, all of that knowledge disappears because the brain cells start to die out. In fact, the only thing that we carried from our high school is language and maybe some social skills and so on. So we can forget everything, but we cannot forget ourselves. And that which we cannot forget is this existence awareness that doesn't need to be remembered, doesn't need to be looked into. It's already present right now. The only duty of a teacher is to simply point that out. In other words, we need an authoritative figure just to point out what we already knew all along. That is it. It's not like you didn't notice. Everyone already knows that I am. Everyone already knows that I am aware. The teacher simply points out, that's it. That's all one needs to recognize, that this final reality is already there. And therefore, the seeking stops. And then we go on to part 4. Brahman is in the form of universe, verse 12 to 15. So it's going to now talk about, we finished this section, Brahman is in the form of jiva. And we now going to see that Brahman is also in the form of the entire universe, the entire physical matter, perceptible matter. So this will be verse 12 to 15. What am I doing now? Part 4, Brahman is in a form of the world called Jagat, between verse 12 to 15. Let's read. Yad adityagatam tejaha jagad bhasayate kilam yad chandramasi yad chagno tat tejo vidhi mamakam.
And you know that the brilliance that obtains in the sun and illumines the entire world, that which is in the moon and which is in the fire, belongs to me.
Gam avishyacha bhutani dharayam yaham ojasa pushnami chaushadhi sarvaha somo bhutva rasatmakaha.
Having entered the earth, I sustain the beings with strength, and I nourish all the vegetation, having become soma in the form of their essence.
Aham vaishvanaro bhutva praninam dehamashritaha pranapana samayuktaha pacham yannam chaturvidham.
Having become the digestive fire, obtaining in the bodies of the living beings, endowed with prana and aprana, I digest the fourfold food.
Sarvasya chaham hridi sannivishtaha mattav smrtir jnanam apohanam cha vedaischa sarvairaham eva vedyaha vedanta krid veda ved eva chaham.
I have entered the hearts of all. From me have come memory, knowledge, and forgetfulness. I alone am the one to be known by all the Vedas, and I alone am the author of the Vedanta and the knower of the Vedas.
So reading verse 12, just like a torchlight illumines the faced objects, awareness illumines the sun, world, and moon. The very awareness that through your mind confirms the existence of the sun, fire, world, and moon is God. Previous section, verse 7 to 11, said that Brahman is in the form of jiva. The jiva, in other words, Brahman is the principle that is awareing your body, mind, intellect, the one that's giving it light, the one that's making it conscious. And this next topic, which will be in verse 12 to 15, it's going to say that Brahman is also the world, in the form of the world. So Brahman is the total reality, is in the form of the world. And the world, in this case, when we say, it means it's inert, it's gross, like gross matter, but also gross, like a subtle body. So when we say matter, it also includes the subtle body, by the way. The subtle body is a very subtle form of matter, and elements like iron and hydrogen and, carbon and sulfur, all of that is gross matter, but it's still matter nevertheless. And so what verse 12 is saying is Brahman is in the form of all matter. That means matter, the subtle matter, but also the gross physical matter. In the Vedic culture, this is the only and the very reason why there's a tendency to be worshipful towards the Ganga, towards Yamuna, towards the sun, towards the moon, towards insects, towards monkeys, towards cows. It's not because the culture is primitive, but and in fact, the person may not understand why they're worshiping this. That's not the point. But the point is, it's still percolating throughout the culture, and that's not just India. We've got in every culture, in Germany, in Macedonia, you've got Africa, we've got all sorts of tribes, South America, wherever you go, Aborigines in Australia, wherever you go, there are certain cultures, certain rituals that a culture will do that may not understand why they do it. If they do, that's even better. But it usually reflects something. It acknowledges the presence of God. It acknowledges the presence of something higher. And so the Vedic culture is the same. It acknowledges the presence by worshiping the water, worshiping the light, the insects, and so on. Krishna in verse 12 is going to bring out only 3 glories out of everything else. If you list everything in the universe, you're going to have a non-stop, huge, infinite book of names and forms. So Krishna is going to point out simply 3 names and forms of this world that we can all relate to. All civilizations can relate to the sun, that is the solar energy. All civilizations can relate to the lunar energy, the moon, and all civilizations can relate to the fire. In other words, the effects of the sun, the moon, and the fire are well known to all beings. And we don't have to be intelligent to know what fire does. We don't have to be intelligent to know what the moon does. We don't have to be intelligent what the sun does. And so Krishna very intelligently chooses these 3 glories that don't require much intelligence to contemplate. Nevertheless, Krishna is going to bring them out and say, I, the total reality, am in the form of these 3 glories. In other words, these glories belong to none other than myself, the final reality, which is the truth of every name form, whether the left side or the right side or the left side, the truth of everything. First one is the sun. When the sun is shining on your skin, what's your attitude towards that? You want to get a tan? Is that where it stops? Yeah, I'm going to expose my skin and get a tan, I want some vitamin D. And then that's it, full stop. No, it's much more than that. So Krishna says that it's not the glory that the sun, that heat that's shining on your very skin, that is God in the form of heat. So you can immediately see how, as we said, sadhana number 2, devotion gets incorporated into our life. No longer is just this ordinary thing called a sun, as we thought it was ordinary. Now we have a different attitude about it. It's not just the sun giving vitamin D and responsible for my sleep and the tides, but also the water evaporation and also the moon cycles and the seasons and vitamin D. And it's it's a social thing. Also go out in the sun. It's not only that, but on top of that, it is Ishvara alone, shining and giving us the opportunity in the form of sleep, in the form of seasons, in the form of vitamin D, in the form of a capacity to socialize. Therefore, sun becomes our object of worship towards the divine. And then Krishna goes and says, on top of that, we also have God in the form of the moon, the lunar energy. In other words, the moon has the power to affect your sleep, has the power to affect your moods, has the power to affect the crops, has the power to affect the tides. So this one innocent object in the sky has a power to do so many things, and it is all because of his power alone. In the India, we have Purnima, which is a full moon. It's considered to be a very auspicious time to worship a personal deity, and therefore also to food fast. So Purnima is an auspicious time to worship one's deity because it is the full moon, and the full moon has apparently energy. If you look at the full moon, you can meditate. It's a very nice, useful meditation object when the full moon is up. In fact, we don't do this nowadays because we're in a house. We don't even know when's the full moon anymore. However, so one is encouraged, if you may consider, next time there's a full moon, just take a moment, maybe 5 minutes. If it's staring through your window at night, that's even better because you don't have to go out. You can just look at it through your bed and just meditate on that. Meditate on the glory of Ishvara in the form of that moon. I was doing that just a few weeks ago, and it was just such a lively experience, and it energizes you. I don't know if you felt that, but try it out. You will see it. It energizes you. And then we also have the Agnihi. This is the fundamental component to the Vedic rituals, to the Vedic culture. Now, in the next verse, 13:14, Krishna is going to elaborate the sun, the moon, and the fire. So now reading verse 13. So verse 12 was an introduction to the sun, moon, and fire. Verse 13 and 14 will be elaborating more.
I sustain human prana, life force, through the sun, and plant kingdom through the moon.
How does the sun sustain us? Well, it sustains not only us, the people, but also the plants and then everything else on earth. It sustains us indirectly. It also sustains us directly. What about indirectly? Suppose you're born underground and you say, well, why should I worship the sun? I don't see the sun. I'm fine without the sun. But then every week the person brings you plants to eat, brings you food to eat. So how does the sun affect us indirectly? By harboring or providing nutrition, providing growth to the plants. In fact, the plants are there even for the animals. So the food source for all beings, sentient beings on earth, is because of the sun alone. Directly, how does this sun, how does God in the form of sun help us? How does it nourish us directly? If you're outside, what happens? The sun rays shine on the skin, and they shine on the Annamaya Kosha, on the physical body, and they energize the physical body. And because the physical body is not separate from the Pranamaya Kosha, from the prana, your energy, that means just generally speaking how you feel, whether you feel fatigued or whether you feel energized, that's the prana. So the Annamaya Kosha affects the Pranamaya Kosha, but Pranamaya Kosha also affects the Manomaya Kosha. And Manomaya Kosha also affects the Vijnanamaya Kosha. So it all starts from going outside innocently, the sun shining on the food sheath. The food sheath affects your energy. That energy affects your mood. Those moods also affect the way you think. Therefore, directly or indirectly, sun still has an effect on the human being. And then what is the word, this prana? It says prana. What is prana? Prana is a common word in yoga, is energy, or a subtle energy or power, which powers the functions of the human body, just like electricity powers the function of various appliances. So even though it's invisible, it is still there because of which those appliances get to do whatever they do. So in that same way, the physical body right now is energized. It's standing upright. Hopefully it is fully awake. Hopefully, right? All of that is because of this prana. And this prana is divided into 5 sections. Prana, apana, samana, vyana, udana. So prana is number 1, is responsible for your inhalation and exhalation. So right now you're breathing. I know you're breathing, right? You're definitely breathing. Good. That is because of prana is in full operation. And then we've got apana. Apana is responsible for excretion. So once the food is consumed, then it has to be excreted. And that is only because of this prana is making that possible. Then we've got the samana. Samana is responsible for digestion. So the food, once eaten, it gets digested and then it gets dispersed. That is because of the samana. And then we've got the vyana. Vyana is responsible for circulation. So the circulation in the body right now, is healthy. And if you move, the circulation improves because it improves the vyana prana. So this is why yoga is also, the yoga asanas are useful, because it stimulates the prana vyana system. Therefore, the circulation improves. As the circulation improves, the manomaya and the vijnana maya also get affected. Therefore, you think clearly. Anyone who's done yoga asanas here for some time, you will understand that the effect of after completing it, you feel clear, you feel quite good about yourself. That is because the entire system is stimulated. And then we've got the udana. Udana is the reversal. So burping or vomiting. Now, what is the energy of udana? It's forceful. If we can remember a time, maybe we took some poisons, maybe chlorine, you touched chlorine water, pool water or something, and then you vomited, your body vomited. How did that feel? It was forceful. So udana is a very forceful energy, even burping, you don't even control it. It just happens by itself. And this is why that udana is also responsible for severing the physical body and the subtle body together. It's not like you say, okay, it's going to happen. Now, no, someone's going to argue and say, yes, there is a mahasamadhi. You can actually, consciously die. That's a different story. But suppose one doesn't practice that. Suppose one doesn't practice when to consciously exit the body. Then that udana will forcefully take away, sever the physical body and the subtle body. So the udana is a very forceful energy. That's why burping, I think hiccups is also udana. So the essence of this verse, it's saying is that prana directly and indirectly is responsible for the health of the annamaya kosha, manomaya kosha, and vijnanamaya kosha. And why is that possible? Because of the sun. And the sun, whether indirectly or directly affects that prana, that sun is none other than the final reality, the Lord. Therefore, devotion to the sun now becomes a worthy object, having heard this knowledge. The Vedic tradition, we have the popular mantras. 2 popular mantras is Aditya mantra, and there's also the Gayatri mantra. Om Bhur Bhuva Svaha Tat Savitur Varenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Diyo Yo Naf Prachodayat. In other words, may the Lord brighten up, may the Lord in the form of Aditya or Surya, the sun, may that Lord brighten up our minds so that we may have clarity of thought and think properly. O Lord, may you help remove our confusions and subjectivity so that we can make the proper decisions in life and have this journey of smoothness percolating throughout our life. Who doesn't want that? Who doesn't want to be clear and have a sense of objectivity towards the world, so much so that I can think properly and make the wisest decisions possible as much as possible, so that the consequences of doing so are in the best probabilities for myself and whoever else is involved because of those decisions being made because of your clear mind. Therefore, the Gayatri mantra is a very powerful mantra because we're asking the Suryaha, the Aditya in the form, the Lord in the form of Suryaha Aditya, to help us to remove our confusions about reality, about ourselves, about what should be done, where should we do, what's our duty, am I doing the right thing, should I do more of this, should I do less of this, should I move away from this person, should I come closer to this person? All of these are common questions that humanity has, and they're important. So therefore, we ask the Lord for this help. And then finally, the moon is also Ishwara. In other words, Ishwara assumes the form of the moon, the moonlight. And this moonlight, it nourishes the kingdom. And this is why the farmers will expose their crops, and not the crops, the seeds, to the moonlight, because they believe, at least, that it will energize those seeds. Therefore, it will make those seeds nourished.
I take form of digestive fire, enzymes, acid, which is supported by prana, and digest 4 types of food.
4 types of consumption of food, not 4 types of food. There's many types of food. This fire that's being spoken of is in 2 forms. There's the external fire. This is common in the Vedic rituals, and there's also the internal fire. The internal fire is referring to the gastric juice, the digestive enzymes. And we also call this in Sanskrit Vaishvanara Agnihi, Vaishvanara Agnihi, or Jatparagni, Jatparagni or Vaishvanara Agnihi, which refers to the digestive juices in the stomach. And this digestive juice cooks your food the second time. So you say to your wife, hey wife, cook me food. Wife complies and she cooks. She cooks it 1 time on the stove. And then she offers it to you. And you say to her, the food is cooked, thank you. It's cooked once. But now what's going to happen is I'm going to cook this food the second time around. And she says, what do you mean by that? And then you start to do your Brahmarpanam Brahmaharihi, your prayer, and then you go into eating mode. And once the food falls into the stomach, cooking number 2 begins. Vaishvanara Agnihi. And what happens there? The digestive juices make this cooking number 1 compatible with the body's system. In other words, it cooks it in such a lovely way as to provide the ability for the body to absorb the carbohydrates, the proteins, the minerals, the vitamins, the nutrients, and thus nourish this body. So every food that is ever cooked doesn't go through once, it goes through 2 times cooking. And Krishna says, I am cooking number 2. In other words, Krishna says, I am the very digestive fire in your stomach, which converts cooked number 1 food into a compatible body absorbing food in a form of vitamins and nutrients. Okay, so in other words, this immediately now changes our relationship to food, because it's no longer, hey, give me food, yum, 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 yum. But what's happening down there? What's happening down there is God in the form of digestive juice is making that food just in the right acidic proportion, able to break it down so that your body can survive and you can enjoy reading your book. You can enjoy having a movie or whatever you do. So this is because of this glory alone. In the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, there's something called the Vaishvanara Agnihi Upasana. Upasana just means meditation. So Vaishvanara Agnihi, so in other words, digestive fire meditation. And what happens here? When you and I are hungry, what do? We say, give me, right? More, give me something, give me food. But what does a yogi do when he or she is hungry? They go, okay, that rumbling in the stomach, that's called hunger. I meditate on that in the form of God. How many of us have ever done that? Something so simple, something so powerful. We don't have to go to a temple, go out there to meditate on the Lord. It is right in our stomach. And next time we're hungry, we can if the food is not available, change our attitude. How so? We say, that is the Lord making the noises, the rumbling. I meditate on that as the Lord itself. And therefore, this makes the person very conscious about the nature of Ishvara in one's life. As I said, sadhana number 2 is bringing Ishvara into one's life. And this is one more way. And then he says that there are 4 types of modes of consumption. The first one is bhakshya. It's masticated, it's chewed, it's then swallowed. So bread, rice, right? Anything hard, it's chewed, and therefore then we swallow it. So bhakshya is number 1. Bhoja is those that are drunk, so milk, tea, coffee, and so on. Then lehya is like honey. Can you swallow honey? No, it's going to get stuck here. Can we chew honey? No, it's not going to work. How can we consume honey? We consume it through licking. So bhakshya, chewing, bhoja, drinking, lehya, licking, and choshya, which is in the form of like we swallow it, so like a powder or a pill. Also, Paramarthananda in this case, or choshya, will say it is a sucked, like a sugar cane. You can suck a sugar cane. So 4 types of consumption of food. Is it ever going to be any different? No, it's always going to be these 4. And this is the beauty of the Vedas. They don't share something that's going to go out of fashion. These 4 are always going to be there. Now, how we chew, how we swallow, that's going to change. But the point is, swallowing and chewing is always going to be there. And so this is the nature of the scriptures. They talk about those things that you cannot negate. You cannot now say, I'm going to put a 5th category in there. How? Open up a hole in the stomach and put food in there. It's unnatural. So 4 natural ways. Now, how does this digestive fire get fanned? Because any fire, to keep it alive, you need to fan it, with oxygen. Now, how does that digestive fire in the stomach, Vaishvanara, get fanned? It says prana, apana, sama ayuktaha, by inhalation and exhalation and excretion. But let's just focus on inhalation and exhalation. So did you ever notice that the more you move, the hungrier your body gets, right? Those who play sports, so they're active, right? The more we move, the more we fan that prana, that digestive fire. Therefore, the more rumbling happens. Therefore, the more often we want to eat. Therefore, the bills of our food increases. So now you can see, you can look at your bills monthly. If you keep track of that, you go, okay, my bills are high. That means what? I'm moving a lot. If you stop moving, those bills reduce automatically. In other words, there's a direct proportion between the amount of movement, because that fans that internal fire, and the amount of food that a person consumes. I don't know for those who are working from home now, compared to when you're working not from home before the COVID. Remember those times that maybe you were more hungry more often? And now at home, there's not much movement, so we're a lot less hungry. To conclude this verse, being given the instruction, being given the glories, we can now change our attitude about the sun, and in this case, particular case, the digestive fire in our stomachs. Therefore, our attitude towards eating is now about bringing Ishvara into our lives. Okay, so therefore our experience of eating improves. No longer let's eat, move on. No, stop, recognize what's happening and enjoy that experience, cherish that experience, and then finish, then move on. Verse 15.
I am seated in the heart, mind specifically, buddhi, of all. Because of me, your mind learns, retains, and forgets. By means of Vedas, I alone am to be known. This Vedanta Sampradaya, which is a tradition used by both the teacher and the student, I, Iswara, am its very author. Being omniscient, I am the knower of the Vedas.
Sarvasya hridi aham sanivishtaha. I, Paramatma, I, Atman, the self, reside in the heart of all. In this case, the heart. When the scriptures talk about the heart, they usually refer to the buddhi. In other words, the awareness. Where is this place where awareness is, quote, found, even though it's already there? The buddhi. In other words, the awareness I am is known through the buddhi alone. What is the buddhi, the intellect? It is a reflecting mirror for consciousness. It is a reflecting mirror for chit. I said that sat chit is the final reality. Sat existence, chit is awareness, and therefore the buddhi is a reflecting mirror for this chit, for this awareness. And how is this known? As the amness, as you're aware of yourself. Why is that so? Because the buddhi is there. This I that Krishna is referring to is thus, because it is in the heart of all, sarvasya, it is illuminating everyone's individual mind. In other words, every person has the same experience. And what is that experience? I am witnessing my thoughts. I am witnessing my emotions. I am witnessing my life. And why is that so? Because aham sarvasya hridihi. I reside in all hearts, in all bodies of every individual. Smritihi jnanam apohanam cha mattaha. So from me originates, smritihi jnanam apohanam, originates the capacity to order, jnanam to know or to understand, smritihi to remember things, and apohanam to forget. Suppose you couldn't forget. Would that be good or would that be not good? You couldn't forget.
Not good.
Not good. We could never forget our old notions, right? We could never undo the stuff that doesn't serve us, right? We would forever be, tamed with dirty stuff, and you could never get rid of it. So thank the Lord that we're able to forget. That's also part of our human experience. In other words, all three, capacity to know, to remember, and to forget, are required for one's liberation. At the end of chapter 18, the last chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna, in fact, reveals this to Krishna. He says, "O Lord, my old notions have been removed, apohanam. I have remembered, smritihi, my duties and what I need to do right now. Because of your grace alone, because of self-knowledge, jnanam, I now remember my nature. I remember who I am. Apohanam, smritihi, and jnanam. All three Arjuna has pointed out to Krishna. In other words, all three are required for one's progress in life. And this can also be interpreted, this verse, by saying that without remembering, without forgetting, without knowing, could experience be possible without these three? Because your entire experience is nothing but forgetting, remembering, and knowing or understanding. Is that not true? That's it. That's like, what's the human experience? Forgets, remembers, and knows things or understands things. That is it. So without the capacity for all these three, the jiva could never liberate oneself. We have to know, we have to remember, we have to forget in order to go through this journey, to figure things out, and thus to free oneself and recognize that I was never the person who forgets. I was never the person who remembers. I was never the person who understands. And therefore, we first have to understand, remember, and forget in order to realize I'm not that one who forgets, understands, and remembers. The second interpretation of this verse is, if you look at these three words, jnanam, smritihi, and apohanam, it means that what does jnanam represent? Knowledge. Now, where does knowledge take place? Does it take place in your dream? Do you learn new things in your dream? Someone's probably going to argue, say yes, but no. In the dream, you only remember things that you have picked up in the waking state. So jnanam in this case refers to the waking state, because in the waking state, we get to learn things. And those things that we have learned about what happens in a dream, all of them come out in a very weird, flexible fashion. Therefore, smritihi, remembrance, is synonymous with dream, because in the dream you remember your waking state and it all gets mixed up. That's because there's no stability there. That's why it's all mixed up. And apohanam, forgetting, what does that represent? Deep sleep, because it is total forgetting of everything. I forgot my life, I forgot even who I am, everything. So apohanam is deep sleep. So in other words, what is Krishna saying here? I am not only the three states, the waking state, the dream state, and the deep sleep state, but I'm also the substratum because of which these three states are known for what they are. We all know about the waking, we all know about the dream, we all know about the deep sleep. Therefore, we have to be other than these three states. And that's called turiya, the fourth principle, because of which these three states get to be identified. And finally, sarvehe vedaihi cha aham eva aham vedantakrit eva cha vedavit. I am verily that which has to be recognized or known by the Vedas. What is the Vedas pointing us? The truth. Now, don't say, what about the Bible? What about the Quran? What about this and that? All of them are trying to point out the truth. So it doesn't matter what religion you're talking about. In other words, Krishna, speaking as the highest reality, says, I am that which is I, the truth, and that which is to be known through the Vedas. So the entire purpose of the Vedas is so that one can discover the truth, not being different from that very truth, because we're all seeking the truth. He also says, I am the subject matter which has to be understood in the Vedas. What has to be understood in the Vedas? The truth. What is the truth? What is my connection to the truth? And where is the truth? All of these questions arise in the mind. They have to be resolved. And therefore, the subject matter of the Vedas is to answer these questions. And Krishna says, I am that alone. In other words, I am the Vedas. The subject matter that both the student and the teacher discuss. In other words, what are we discussing? None other than the Lord in the form of the Vedas. The formless Lord in the form of the formed texts called the Vedas. He also says, I am the author of Vedanta. So who authored? Now, what does Vedanta mean? Veda Anta. In other words, the final knowledge, the knowledge comes at the end. That means when all is said and done, what is the final knowledge? Vedanta. In other words, I am the author of Vedanta. And what are we studying now? Vedanta. So what are we studying? God in the form of Vedanta. Conclusion of part 3 and 4. Brahman, Satchit is all this. Jiva, Jagat. There's nothing other than Brahman alone. And you cannot stop there. You have to do one more statement after that. So what did I say? I said that Brahman, the final reality, is none other than the Jiva and the Jagat. But what if you stop there? Is that complete? There's one more statement you have to make after that. Can someone tell me?
Maybe it's that there's a witness to both of those states, the Jiva and the Jagat.
And who is that one?
You.
I am. In other words, good. In other words, you have to make it then. You have to say, not only is Brahman the Jiva, the Jagat, and therefore, because Brahman is everything, for that reason alone, I too must be that Brahman alone. Okay, and then the statement, the equation gets resolved, because then you're including also your apparent self, the self in the form of this person. And this concludes part 4. Next week, we will do part 5, which is the meaning of Purushottama. What's the title of chapter 15? Purushottama Yogaha. So we will see what this Purushottama refers to. Sarve bhavantu sukhinaha, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschid dukha bhag bhavet. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.